He thought he was just raising his daughter alone. She thought her world was falling apart. Neither expected one evening to create a new family. Listen closely. Share your feelings in the comments and make sure to subscribe for more heartwarming tales. The crash of glass against the restaurant wall silenced every fork, every whisper, every gentle clink of plates. Portland's late-night hum seemed to pause inside that elegant dining room as all eyes turned toward the tall man in the expensive suit. Richard Hale loomed over the auburn-haired woman seated across from him, his face twisted with fury, his words cut through the air with the kind of bitterness that makes strangers hold their breath. "You think you're untouchable, don't you? Living off your family's name." Lauren Bennett did not rise to meet his anger. She remained seated, her back straight, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. Her voice, though soft, carried a steady edge. "Richard, please, you are making a scene. Sit down or just leave." He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound, and tossed his napkin onto the table. "Fine, then enjoy paying for this disaster with your millions." And with that, he stormed out, the heavy doors swinging shut behind him, leaving the restaurant wrapped in an uneasy hush. At a corner table, Ethan Walker instinctively shifted his body, shielding his 6-year-old daughter from the spectacle. Mia didn't need to see this. Life had already asked too much of her, and Ethan guarded her innocence like it was the most fragile thing he owned. Yet, when he glanced down, her wide eyes were still following the auburn-haired woman, who now sat alone, her meal untouched, her shoulders squared, though her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Daddy," Mia whispered, her small hand tugging at his sleeve. "Is that lady okay?" Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to say yes, to wrap the night in reassurance and finish their mac and cheese in peace. But all he managed was a quiet, "I don't know, sweetheart. Let's just eat." Mia pushed her plate away. She was stubborn, just like her mother had once been. Ethan had learned that when Mia set her jaw, there was no easy redirection. And tonight, as they stood to leave, he knew she wouldn't simply walk past the woman without a word. They moved slowly toward the exit, weaving between tables until they reached her. Lauren lifted her gaze, her eyes catching the light, deep brown flecked with amber, weary yet proud. She forced a polite smile, the kind that masks more than it reveals. Before Ethan could guide Mia along, his daughter stopped. "Your hair is pretty," she said, her voice clear and earnest in the hushed room. "It looks like fall leaves." For the first time that night, Lauren's composure softened. The polite mask slipped, replaced by something fragile and genuine. A small smile curved her lips. Her eyes warmed despite the redness rimmed around them. "Thank you," she whispered, leaning closer as if sharing a secret with the little girl. "That's the kindest thing anyone has said to me all evening." In that simple exchange, something shifted. What had begun with shattered glass and angry words gave way to a spark, small, unexpected, but powerful enough to change the course of 3 lives forever. Ethan had hoped the moment would pass quickly, that they could slip out of the restaurant and leave the memory of broken glass and raised voices behind. But Mia had other plans. As they stepped past Lauren's table, her small fingers tightened around his hand and her chin lifted with the kind of determination that made Ethan's heart ache. "Daddy," she said softly, yet firmly enough to halt his stride, "we should drive her to home, like when you helped Miss Peterson when her car broke down." Ethan felt the heat rise to his cheeks. His daughter's heart was too big for the world sometimes, and he loved her for it. Still, the idea of offering a ride to a stranger whose world clearly belonged to another league, seemed unthinkable. He bent closer, lowering his voice. "Sweetheart, I'm sure the lady can take care of herself. We don't want to bother her." But Lauren, who had been quietly gathering her purse and phone, looked up for the first time that evening. Her smile reached her eyes. "Actually," she said gently, "I would appreciate the help. He drove me here and, well, I hadn't exactly planned on making other arrangements tonight." Ethan hesitated, caught between politeness and the tightening knot in his stomach. He didn't want her to think his daughter's suggestion had been forced on her. "Are you sure?" he asked. "We're headed that way anyway, but I don't want you to feel obligated." She tilted her head, studying him for a beat longer than was comfortable, as if she were weighing not just his offer, but the character of the man behind it. Then she extended her hand, calm and assured. "Lauren Bennett, And if it's not too much trouble, I'd be grateful. Her handshake was firm, her skin cool against his callous palm. Ethan introduced himself in return, his voice sounding unexpectedly formal. Ethan Walker, and this is Mia. Hi, Mia chimed, grinning as though she had orchestrated the entire rescue mission. The walk to the parking lot was quiet, the night air cooler than Ethan expected, brushing against them with the faint scent of rain. As they approached his 10-year-old Honda Civic, Ethan suddenly became hyper-aware of the faded paint, the booster seat in the back, and the stack of graded essays spilling from the passenger seat. He cleared his throat, rushing to sweep aside the clutter. Sorry about the mess. Papers, they travel everywhere with me. Lauren didn't flinch, didn't even glance at the worn fabric seats. She slipped in gracefully, folding her auburn hair behind one shoulder. So you're a teacher, she said, as if she'd just discovered something admirable rather than ordinary. High school English, he replied, settling Mia into her booster seat before taking the wheel. Roosevelt High, 10th and 11th grade mostly. That must be rewarding, she murmured, her tone thoughtful in a way that made Ethan glance at her. He couldn't tell if she was making conversation or if she genuinely meant it, but the sincerity in her expression softened something inside him. They drove through Portland's glowing streets, Mia chatting happily from the back about her friends, her teacher, and her unicorn shirt. Lauren listened attentively, laughing at the right moments, asking questions that made Mia beam with pride. Ethan caught himself watching her in the rearview mirror, surprised at how naturally she leaned into their little world. Left at the next light, Lauren directed. After a while, Ethan obeyed, though his brow furrowed when he saw where they were headed. Moments later, the looming towers of Heartfelt Haven rose against the night sky, glass windows catching the city lights like a jeweled crown. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. He had passed by this building countless times, always admiring its sleek design, never imagining he would pull up to its grand entrance. The kind of place that had valet service and a doorman who knew everyone's name. The kind of place utterly removed from his life. As he stopped in front of the gleaming lobby, a uniformed attendant opened the car door. Lauren turned toward him and Mia with a grateful smile. Thank you for the ride. Really, you didn't have to, but I'm glad you did. Her eyes lingered a little longer on Ethan's, carrying a weight he couldn't quite name. In that moment, as Maya waved from the back seat and Lauren stepped into the golden light of Heartfelt Haven, Ethan felt something he hadn't in years, a sense that life had just shifted and nothing would be quite the same again. The next afternoon, Ethan found himself standing outside Kindling Cafe, smoothing the wrinkles from a shirt he normally reserved for parent-teacher nights. He wasn't sure what had possessed him to agree so quickly when Lauren texted. Maybe it was her genuine smile the night before, or the way Mia had lit up around her. Or maybe it was something Ethan hadn't allowed himself to admit in years, a quiet pull toward possibility. Kindling Cafe was cozy yet polished with exposed brick walls, warm wood tables, and the soft hum of jazz playing from hidden speakers. The air smelled of roasted beans and something sweet, chocolate maybe. Ethan usually avoided places like this. One latte cost as much as an entire week of the drip coffee he brewed in the break room. But today felt different, as if the extra expense had already been justified by the invitation. Lauren was already there, seated by a window where pale light spilled across her auburn hair. She wore a cream sweater and simple jeans, looking far younger and far more approachable than the poised woman Ethan had met the night before. When she saw him, she waved, her smile free of pretense. Something in his chest eased. How was your day molding young minds? She asked as he slid into the chair opposite her. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. Less molding, more herding cats. But we had a good discussion about Fitzgerald, almost made up for the glazed eyes during grammar review. Her laugh was soft, genuine, and it lingered in the space between them. She flagged down the server before Ethan could open his mouth. 2 almond milk lattes and a slice of their chocolate torte to share, she ordered confidently, then turned back to him with a small shrug. I hope that's okay. I took the liberty of studying the menu early. That's perfect, Ethan replied, secretly impressed. He hadn't expected her to know this place. But when he asked, Lauren confessed with a blush. Truth is, I don't come out much for things like this. My work tends to keep me isolated. Ethan leaned back, curiosity stirring. And what kind of work is that? A flicker crossed her expression as though she weighed how much to reveal. Finally, she offered, investment management. Family business? Not nearly as exciting as it sounds. He grinned. Try explaining semicolons to 16-year-olds. I'll take your boredom over mine any day. She laughed again, covering her mouth briefly, and Ethan caught the way her shoulders loosened, as if she hadn't expected to feel at ease. Fair point, but I'd wager you make a difference. That's something special. Their drinks arrived, steam curling into the air, the slice of chocolate torte gleaming under the cafe's soft light. Conversation flowed more easily than Ethan anticipated. Lauren asked about his students, about why he chose teaching when he admitted the pay barely covered the bills. He told her about his love for stories, for the way literature could pry open a teenager's world when nothing else could. She listened, not politely, but attentively, as though every word mattered. In turn, Lauren spoke about growing up with three older brothers, about her passion for art history, a degree she never used but never stopped loving. She described standing in front of Renaissance paintings that had survived centuries, how they made her feel small in the best way. You'd get along with Mia, Ethan said without thinking. Our fridge is plastered with her artwork. She's going through a very prolific phase. I'd love to see them sometime, Lauren replied softly, almost surprising herself with the admission. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of those words hanging between them. Outside, Portland traffic moved in a steady rhythm. But inside, the cafe felt like a pocket of stillness. Ethan realized he hadn't laughed like this or felt this light in years. When the clock on the wall crept toward 4:30, he startled, remembering Mia's after-school program. I need to pick up my daughter, and he said, guilt flashing across his face. Lauren shook her head quickly. Don't apologize. Family comes first, always. It wasn't just politeness, it was conviction. And as Ethan stood to leave, offering to walk her out, he couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't just coffee. It was the beginning of something neither of them had planned, but both, in some quiet corner of their hearts, had been waiting for. The invitation had slipped out before Ethan could stop himself. He had meant it as a polite gesture, a way to extend the ease of the afternoon. But when Lauren's eyes lit up at the idea of dinner, he knew there was no taking it back. By the time he picked Mia up and drove home, he was already replaying the state of his apartment in his head. Unfolded laundry on the couch, textbooks stacked in uneven towers, a fridge door covered in Mia's rainbow drawings. It wasn't the kind of place someone like Lauren Bennett would expect. Yet, when she knocked at their door later that evening, carrying a small bag with a bottle of sparkling water and a loaf of crusty bread, she stepped inside as though she belonged. The apartment was modest, the furniture mismatched, but Lauren's smile never faltered. She ran her hand along the worn arm of the couch as if it were something treasured. It feels like a real home, she said warmly, and the knot in Ethan's chest loosened just a little. In the kitchen, spaghetti boiled on the stove while garlic sizzled in oil. Ethan handed her a cutting board almost without thinking. Want to help with the salad? Gladly, she said, rolling up the sleeves of her sweater with a confidence that made him laugh. She chopped tomatoes with practiced precision, admitting with a grin that her housekeeper had once insisted she learn the basics. Mia perched on a stool at the counter, swinging her legs while peppering Lauren with questions. What her favorite color was, whether she liked unicorns, if she'd ever had churros. Lauren answered each one with patience, her laughter ringing through the small kitchen until it felt larger than it was. Dinner was nothing fancy, spaghetti tossed with sauce, garlic bread, and a salad that leaned heavily on Mia's love for cucumbers. But Lauren treated it like a feast. She listened to Mia chatter about school, about the hamster she'd been allowed to bring home for the weekend, about the story she was writing in her notebook. She asked thoughtful questions, laughed at the right moments, and never once checked her phone. After the plates were cleared, Lauren insisted on drying the dishes while Ethan washed. Mia tugged her hand toward the bedroom. It's story time. Daddy always reads to me, even when he's tired. Ethan, caught off guard, hesitated at the doorway. Reading to Mia was their ritual, their anchor. He wasn't sure he was ready to share it, but Mia had already pulled Lauren onto the bed, placing Charlotte's Web in her lap. Lauren read with a voice that was calm, steady, and somehow enchanting. She paused at the right places, gave each character a gentle inflection, and by the time Wilbur met Charlotte, Mia was tucked against her side, eyes fluttering closed. Ethan stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the scene with a weight he couldn't name pressing against his ribs. Later, when Mia was asleep and the hallway light glowed softly across the apartment, Ethan found Lauren in the kitchen again, running her fingertips across the calendar taped to the fridge, parent-teacher conferences, bill due dates, Mia's dance lessons, every square filled with reminders of a life lived carefully, stretched thin but intact. "You juggle a lot," she said quietly, turning to face him. He shrugged. "No more than any single parent. We manage." Her gaze softened, and for a moment, the polished, untouchable woman from the restaurant vanished. "You don't just manage, Ethan. You make it look effortless. And Mia, she's extraordinary because of you." The words settled in the room like something sacred. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Mia's small voice called from the bedroom, breaking the spell. Ethan smiled faintly, murmuring, "Magic waits." And as he turned back toward his daughter's room, he carried with him the startling realization that Lauren Bennett wasn't just being kind. She was choosing to step into their world, and she cherished it. Messy laundry, spaghetti nights, and all. It happened on an ordinary evening, the kind where spaghetti sauce stains lingered on the counter, and Mia hummed to herself in her room, coloring by the glow of a bedside lamp. Ethan was at the kitchen table, red pen in hand, moving through another stack of essays when his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. He almost ignored it, but something in the persistence of the ring made him answer. "Mr. Walker, this is David Halpern, senior editor at Cascade Press. We received your manuscript and would like to discuss publication options. Are you available to meet this week?" Ethan nearly dropped his pen. For a moment, words refused to come. His manuscript, the young adult fantasy he had been working on in secret for nearly 5 years, wasn't supposed to be in anyone's hands. He had sent queries, yes, but Cascade Press didn't accept unsolicited submissions. His heart pounded so hard he could barely hear himself stammer, "Yes, yes, I'm available." The call ended with a meeting scheduled for Friday. Ethan stared at his phone in disbelief, as though the device itself might explain the miracle. But deep down, a question stirred that he couldn't shake. How had Cascade gotten the manuscript in the first place? Later that night, Lauren arrived with takeout from his favorite Thai place, her presence filling the room with warmth, as it always did. They sat at the small table, Mia happily twirling noodles while Lauren listened to her chatter. When Mia finally drifted off to sleep, Ethan leaned back, his gaze fixed on the woman across from him. "I got a call tonight," he began cautiously, "from Cascade Press. They want to meet about my book." Lauren's eyes lit up instantly. "Ethan, that's incredible." But there was something in her smile, too quick, too knowing, that made him narrow his eyes. "You wouldn't happen to know how they got my manuscript, would you?" For the briefest second, she froze. Then, almost sheepishly, she set down her fork. "I might have helped open a door." Ethan blinked. "Helped? How?" She sighed, brushing a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "Remember when I borrowed your laptop last month to check my email while you were giving Mia a bath? I saw the file on your desktop. I read the first few pages. It was brilliant, Ethan. Too good to stay hidden. So I mentioned it to a friend who knows someone at Cascade." His first instinct was irritation. His work was personal, fragile, something he had guarded fiercely. "Lauren, I wanted to do this on my own. I didn't want favors or shortcuts." Her eyes softened, filled with something deeper than apology. "I didn't pull strings. I didn't demand they publish you. I only placed your manuscript where someone could read it. The rest, your words, your story, that's all you." Ethan sat in silence, wrestling with pride and gratitude. She had crossed into a space he'd kept locked. Yet she had done it not to diminish him, but to believe in him when he couldn't believe in himself. Finally, he exhaled. "I don't know whether to scold you or thank you." "Maybe both," she said with a small smile. A reluctant laugh escaped him, tension giving way to something gentler. "All right, thank you for believing in me, for seeing something worth fighting for." Lauren reached across the table, her hand brushing his. "You deserve this chance, Ethan. I just didn't want you to keep hiding from the world." In that moment, beneath the soft hum of the refrigerator and the quiet of the night, Ethan realized what her gesture truly meant. It wasn't about influence or power. It was about faith. Faith in his voice, his dreams, his worth. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe it, too. The invitation came with such casual warmth that Ethan almost missed the weight of it. Lauren had suggested a weekend away, just the three of them, at her family's lake house, a few hours outside Portland. She'd said it lightly, promising separate rooms, plenty of space for Mia to run wild, and a quiet place to celebrate the good news about Cascade Press. Ethan hesitated. 2 months wasn't long, not in the careful world he lived in. But the spark in Mia's eyes when she heard the word lake house left him little choice. The drive wound through evergreen forests and rolling hills until the trees parted to reveal a glassy lake stretching wide under the afternoon sun. Lauren's lake house, as she called it, rose from the water's edge like something from a magazine, with floor-to-ceiling windows, cedar beams, and a deck that seemed to float over the rippling surface. Maya squealed with delight, racing down the dock to wave at a family of ducks gliding by. Ethan followed more slowly, his hand brushing the weathered rail as if to remind himself it was real. The weekend unfolded with an ease that startled him. Mornings were spent swimming, afternoons hiking trails that smelled of pine, and evenings roasting marshmallows by the fire pit while Mia sang songs from school plays. Lauren moved seamlessly into their rhythm, helping Mia bait her fishing line, laughing as she lost spectacularly at board games. Sitting cross-legged on the deck in jeans and a flannel shirt, her hair tumbling free in the wind, Ethan found himself forgetting titles and wealth, forgetting the polished woman who had first caught his eye under the worst circumstances. Here she was, simply Lauren. But on their second night, after Mia had fallen asleep in a nest of blankets, Lauren asked Ethan to join her on the deck. The lake shimmered silver under the moon, cicadas humming in the distance. She held a glass of wine in both hands, her knuckles pale with tension. "There's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice quieter than he'd ever heard it. Ethan set down his own glass, the knot in his stomach tightening. "All right," she drew a breath, steadying herself. "My family doesn't just dabble in investments. We own Bennett Global. It's one of the largest private equity firms in the country. And after my father retired last year, I became CEO. The company manages over $40 billion in assets." The number hit Ethan like a cold wave. $40 billion. He sat back, words failing him, the pieces clicking into place. The Hearthlight Haven apartment, the easy confidence, the glimpses of a life far removed from his own. He had suspected she was well off. But this was another world entirely. "I didn't tell you sooner," Lauren continued, twisting her fingers together, "because people treat me differently when they know. Men either want my money or resent me for it. That night at the restaurant, Richard exploded because he just found out who I really am. I didn't want you to look at me the way he did." Ethan was silent for a long moment, the lake lapping gently against the dock. Finally, he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Lauren, yes, it's overwhelming, but I didn't fall for a balance sheet. I fell for the woman who reads to my daughter like her stories matter. Who makes spaghetti night feel like a holiday? Who believes in me even when I don't believe in myself? That doesn't change." Her breath caught, and when she met his eyes, tears shimmered there, not of fear, but of relief. He reached for her hand, grounding her, steadying himself. "We'll figure it out," he said softly. "Not because of your money, not in spite of it, but because of who we are together." The night wrapped around them, quiet and still, as their fingers intertwined, and when Ethan leaned in to kiss her, it was not the kiss of a man dazzled by wealth, but of a man who had finally found someone worth trusting with both his heart and his daughters. After that night on the deck, something between them shifted. The truth was out, the weight of secrets lifted, and though Ethan still felt the enormity of Lauren's world pressing at the edges of his own, she never let it overshadow what they were building. She leaned in, not away, stepping into the rhythm of their days with an eagerness that surprised him. It began with the small things. She showed up at Mia's school play, sliding into the crowded gymnasium bleachers in a simple cardigan, clapping as loudly as any parent when Mia delivered her one line on stage. Afterward, She posed for photos with Mia and her classmates, crouching to their level, unbothered by sticky hands tugging at her sweater or glitter glue smudges on her sleeve. The other parents whispered at first, recognizing the woman whose face occasionally graced the business section. But soon they saw what Ethan saw, a woman fully present, laughing at knock-knock jokes, cheering for papier-mâché volcanoes at the science fair, slipping seamlessly into the messy joy of ordinary life. In return, Ethan found himself invited into her world, a place he had only glimpsed from the outside. One evening, she asked him to accompany her to a charity gala. He resisted at first, picturing himself in a borrowed suit, awkward among men who wore custom tailoring like second skin. But when he finally stood beside her under the glow of chandeliers, he discovered she didn't need him polished. She only needed him there. Lauren introduced him proudly, her hand resting lightly on his arm. And though the conversation swirled with words like capital funds and market strategy, Ethan grounded himself in the simple truth. He wasn't there to impress anyone but her. The contrast between their two worlds could have been sharp enough to divide them. Instead, it became a balance, each learning to move with ease in the other's space. On Saturday mornings, she joined Ethan and Mia for pancakes in the cluttered kitchen, syrup dripping across the table, while Mia argued about who got the last chocolate chip. On Sunday evenings, Ethan accompanied Lauren to gallery openings, where she explained her love for brushstrokes and composition, her voice softening whenever she talked about art. It wasn't long before the question of where began to hang in the air. Ethan's apartment, though filled with love, was too small for three. Lauren's penthouse at Heartfelt Haven, though spacious, never felt right to Ethan, who saw in its gleaming floors a life that didn't belong to him or Mia. So, one crisp autumn afternoon, they walked hand in hand down a tree-lined street in Portland and paused in front of a brownstone with ivy climbing its brick face. It wasn't the grandest house on the block. The floors creaked, the paint needed refreshing, and the backyard was little more than a patch of grass. But when Mia darted inside and declared the attic would be her castle, and when Ethan noticed the way Lauren's smile softened as she traced her fingers along the worn banister, the decision came easily. They signed the papers within the month. For Ethan, it was a stretch financially, but Lauren insisted it was modest enough that he could contribute meaningfully, and that mattered to him more than he could put into words. For Lauren, it was a home not chosen for its prestige, but for its promise. The promise of dinners together, of laughter echoing down the hall, of roots planted in shared soil. On their first night in the brownstone, they ate takeout on the living room floor, surrounded by boxes. Mia fell asleep, curled against Lauren's side, her head resting on her lap. Ethan looked at them, at the woman who had chosen this simple space over the luxury waiting elsewhere, and felt something he hadn't in years. Certainty. This was their home. Not perfect, not polished, but real. And it was enough. The brownstone had barely settled into its own rhythm when Ethan decided he couldn't wait any longer. Life with Lauren and Mia already felt like the family he had once thought impossible, and he wanted to make it real, permanent. The idea for the proposal came to him one quiet evening, watching Lauren and Mia roll out cookie dough on the kitchen counter, flour dusting both of their cheeks as they laughed. It wasn't about grandeur or spectacle. It was about home, about choosing each other in the most ordinary, extraordinary way. So he and Mia began to plan in secret. They strung fairy lights across the dining room, looping them from window to window until the space glowed like a constellation brought indoors. They decorated the table with Mia's drawings clipped to string, each one proudly declaring love in the language of crayons and glitter glue. Ethan cooked his grandmother's coq au vin, a recipe he hadn't attempted in years, the aroma of simmering wine and herbs filling every corner of the house. Mia insisted on wearing her favorite dress, a flower tucked behind her ear, determined to play her part in what she called the most special dinner. When Lauren walked in that Saturday evening, tired from a long day at the office, she stopped in the doorway. The lights twinkled softly. The table was set with mismatched plates, and Mia stood solemnly at attention as though she were announcing a royal ball. "What's all this?" Lauren asked, her voice already catching. "It's a special dinner," Mia said, her little hands folded behind her back, "because Daddy has something important to ask you." Lauren turned to Ethan, eyes wide, lips parted in surprise. He stood at the end of the table, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might give him away before he spoke. Slowly, he sank to one knee, pulling from his pocket a small velvet box that had belonged to his grandmother. Inside lay a vintage emerald ring, modest compared to anything Lauren might own, but heavy with family history and meaning. "Lauren Bennett," he began, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "You walked into our lives on the worst night of yours, and somehow it became the luckiest night of mine. You've brought laughter back into our home, love back into our days, and a sense of hope I thought I'd lost. I don't care that you're a CEO or that you manage more money than I can imagine. I care that you read extra chapters to Mia because she begs for them, that you bring me coffee on Sunday mornings, and that you choose us every single time. You are already part of this family. But tonight I'm asking you to make it forever." He opened the box, the emerald catching the light. "Will you marry me and make us whole?" Tears spilled down Lauren's cheeks as she pressed her hands to her mouth, nodding before she could even speak. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, her voice breaking into laughter through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times. Yes." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling before he could rise. Mia launched herself forward, wrapping both arms around them in a hug so fierce it nearly toppled him from his knees. "Does this mean Lauren is my mom now?" she asked, her face glowing with hope. Lauren looked at Ethan, who nodded, unable to find his voice, turning back to Mia. Lauren cupped her cheeks, her own tears falling freely. "If you'd like that, sweetheart, I would be honored to be your mom." Mia beamed, burying her face into Lauren's shoulder. The three of them clung together under the glow of fairy lights. The little dining room transformed into the brightest place on earth. For Ethan, the moment was more than a proposal. It was a promise that no matter what worlds they came from, this was the one they would build together. The wedding was everything they had hoped for, not because of extravagance, but because of its heart. Ethan and Lauren chose the backyard of their brownstone, stringing white lights through the branches of the old maple tree and covering picnic tables with simple linens. Friends from Ethan's school sat beside Lauren's colleagues in tailored suits. Neighbors brought casseroles that sat alongside catered trays, and Maya twirled in her flower girl dress, scattering petals with the seriousness of a cathedral ceremony. For a few hours, two worlds that should have clashed instead blended into laughter, clinking glasses, and music that spilled out into the street. Lauren's brothers flew in, rolling up their sleeves to help carry chairs. Ethan's fellow teachers mingled shyly at first, but soon found themselves deep in conversation with investors who knew nothing about homework, but everything about human connection. The air smelled of roses and barbecue, champagne, and apple pie. It was imperfect, eclectic, and exactly right. When Lauren walked down the aisle on the arm of her eldest brother, her eyes shimmering as they locked with Ethan's, time seemed to fold into itself. The woman who had once sat alone in a restaurant, holding back tears, now stood before him radiant with certainty. Their vows were simple, heartfelt promises spoken through smiles and tears. And when Ethan kissed her, Mia squealed and clapped so loudly that the entire gathering laughed through their own tears. 6 months later, rather than jetting off on a honeymoon for two, they packed bags for three. "This is our beginning," Lauren had said, brushing a hand over Mia's cheek. "How could we start it without her?" So they boarded a plane to Italy, an adventure that belonged as much to a little girl as it did to newlyweds. In Florence, they wandered through cobbled streets. Maya perched on Ethan's shoulders as she pointed out gelato shops with wide-eyed delight. They tasted flavors and colors she had never seen: pistachio green, raspberry pink, chocolate so dark it left smudges across her smile. In Rome, Lauren guided them through museums, her voice filled with wonder as she knelt beside Mia to explain brushstrokes and marble statues. Ethan watched them both, overwhelmed by the quiet symmetry of his two worlds meeting in the most ordinary moments. A child licking melting gelato from her fingers, while her stepmother whispered about art. One afternoon, they stood together in front of a Renaissance masterpiece, sunlight streaming through high windows. Lauren slipped her hand into Ethan's, her thumb brushing lightly across his palm. "Happy?" he asked, his voice low. She turned to him, her profile glowing in the gallery light. "Beyond words," she whispered. That night in Portland, when Richard stormed out and everything felt broken, I thought it was the worst moment of my life. Now I see it was just the universe clearing space for this, for us. Mia, standing on her tiptoes to study the painting, glanced back at them with the blunt certainty only children possess. Even better than unicorns, she declared. Ethan laughed, squeezing both their hands, and knew she was right. This was more than a honeymoon. It was the beginning of a family that had been stitched together by chance, tested by truth, and bound forever by love. 2 years passed, and the rhythm of their lives shifted once again. The brownstone that had once seemed spacious now rang with the cries and laughter of newborn twins. A boy and a girl with auburn curls like Lauren's and a quiet determination in their eyes that reminded Ethan of himself. Mia, now 8, wore her title of big sister like a crown, proudly reading bedtime stories to the babies, teaching them the importance of crayons and cookies and reminding anyone who would listen that this was her family, her forever. For Ethan, life had unfolded in ways he could never have scripted. The manuscript that Cascade Press had taken a chance on became a bestseller, and with 2 sequels under contract, he was granted a sabbatical from teaching. No longer confined to late-night grading sessions at the kitchen table, he now wrote in the mornings, sunlight spilling across pages, the sound of children playing drifting in through the window. His words, once hidden on his laptop, now carried into homes across the country, filling shelves and hearts. Lauren, too, found her life reshaped. She continued as CEO of Bennett Global, but her leadership took on a new face. She restructured the company's investments, prioritizing sustainable growth and social impact over sheer profit. And with Ethan's encouragement, she founded a foundation dedicated to educational equity, funding scholarships for children who, like Mia, needed someone to believe in them. For the first time, her wealth and power felt aligned with her heart. She wasn't just building portfolios, she was building futures. Evenings became their sanctuary. After the twins were tucked into cribs, and Mia had retreated to her room with a book, Ethan and Lauren would slip out onto the back porch. The old maple tree they had strung with wedding lights still stood tall, its branches now shading a yard scattered with toys. They would sit side by side in weathered chairs, the quiet of Portland wrapping around them as they listened to the soft hum of the neighborhood. One such evening, Lauren leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, her gaze sweeping over the home they had filled with laughter, the life they had built from the ground up. "Do you ever miss the penthouse?" Ethan asked, half teasing, half wondering if she longed for the luxury she had left behind. She shook her head slowly, her fingers tightening around his. "Not for a second," she said. Then she turned to him, her eyes shimmering in the glow of the porch light. This is the richest I've ever been." Ethan pressed a kiss to her hair, his chest swelling with the truth of her words. The wealth she spoke of wasn't counted in billions or measured in square footage. It was in Mia's laughter echoing through the hall, in the soft weight of the twins curled against them, in the shared meals and late-night stories, and the steady comfort of knowing they had chosen each other fully. As the night deepened and the stars blinked overhead, Ethan closed his eyes and breathed it in. He had never wanted power, never sought fortune. What he had wanted, what he had fought to protect, was family. And sitting on that porch with Lauren by his side and the life they had created just beyond the screen door, he knew he had found it. This was there forever. This was wealth no market could touch, no storm could shake. And that's where our story finds its home. Not in the wealth of a penthouse or the power of a company, but in the laughter of children, the glow of porch lights, and the quiet certainty of love that lasts. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe that family is the truest kind of wealth. And if you'd like more stories like this, filled with hope, second chances, and love, don't forget to subscribe and join us here. Your support keeps these stories alive, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. In the quiet aftermath of shattered glass and stormy words, Ethan and Lauren discovered that true wealth is not measured in billions or penthouses, but in the fragile, fierce choice to show up again and again for the people who make ordinary moments sacred. Ethan, a single dad guarding his daughter's innocence like a flickering candle, learned that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the door through which love walks in, unannounced and life-changing. Lauren, the billionaire CEO who once feared her fortune would eclipse her heart, found that stepping out of marble towers into a cluttered kitchen filled with spaghetti stains and crayon masterpieces was the bravest investment she ever made. Their story whispers a timeless truth. Family is not found in blood or bank accounts, but forged in the small, stubborn acts of presence, reading one more chapter, drying dishes side by side, believing in someone's dream before they dare to. It is the courage to let a 6-year-old's kindness rewrite your ending, to trade polished perfection for messy, magnificent realness. This is the richest life, not the one that glitters, but the one that holds you when the lights go out. What about you? Has a stranger's kindness or a child's stubborn heart ever pulled you from a bad night into a beautiful beginning? Drop your story in the comments below. Let us fill this space with proof that love still rewrites destinies. And if these tales of second chances and chosen families move you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because every week we are bringing more stories that remind us the greatest fortunes are the ones we build together, one heartbeat at a time.